Welcome to Middle East Observer with me, Nicholas Richardson. And in this programme, we're going to look at Iraq, which has seen some weeks of conflict. For several weeks now, Iraq has become a country where politics has returned to the streets. Mass anti-government protests are not only of a social, political or economic nature, but also show how deeply divided the largest religious group in this country is. The Shiites, constituting over 60% of the population in Iraq, face a dilemma that is crucial for the existence of their country. On one side of the political disagreement is the charismatic Muqtada as-Sadr. Coming from a well-known and prestigious family with roots in Lebanon and Iran, the Shiite leader stands up to the former Prime Minister Noor al-Maliki, who is supported by Iran and pro-Iranian armed groups known as Hassad al-Sham. Al-Sadr supporters occupied the Iraqi parliament with the police and military not intervening. Demonstrators opposed the nomination of the pro-Maliki politician Mohammed al-Shia al-Sudani as Prime Minister. The parliamentary crisis, of which al-Sadr himself is part, made it impossible to pass the budget which, according to commentators, will delay the process of reform and reconstruction of the country's economy, whose raw materials should provide a standard of living for Iraqis similar to that of the rich countries of the Persian Gulf. According to some observers, al-Sadr is playing a very dangerous game that may threaten the stability of the state. At the expense of its ambitions, Iraq, along with Iran and Lebanon, is the main Shiite centre in the world. In Iraq, there are the most sacred places for this branch of Islam. The tomb of Ali Muhammad's cousin and son-in-law, according to the Shiites, the only rightful successor of the Prophet of Islam in Najaf, or Karbala, the place where Muhammad's grandson, Imam Hussein, died in an unequal battle with political opponents. In Islam, religion and politics are one. So for the Shiites, this unity of politics and religion also includes theology. Muqtada al-Sadr has manoeuvred between Iran, which has traditionally considered Iraq its historical and religious sphere of influence, and independence from Iranian ayatollahs. This independence of Iraqi Shiites from Iran is a key issue, not only from the perspective of Iraq's political sovereignty from Iran, but also from below. The West has often overlooked the Iraqi Shiite separation from its younger Iranian cousins. It is crucial to Middle East stability that the Shiites of Iraq, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia and Lebanon do not orient themselves towards Iran, which is using its religious ideology to destabilize the region. According to observers, al-Sadr wants to replace the highest Shiite authority in Iraq, which is the 91-year-old Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani. Sistani, although of Iranian origin, supports Iraq's sovereignty from Iran and opposes Ayatollah Khomeini's ideology. Sistani is undoubtedly the greatest Shiite authority in this country and enjoys the greatest recognition among Iraqi Shiites. During his pilgrimage to Iraq in March 2021, Pope Francis met him. Therefore, commentators point out that al-Sadr, although he does not have such moral and religious qualifications, would like to take over the followers of Sistani after his death. ISIS, which is still active in the Sunni northern part of the country, takes advantage of the turmoil in Iraq. It is also disrupting Iraqi Kurdistan, where there are armed incidents with the Turkish army. Some commentators point out that the current crisis that has engulfed the Iraqi capital is a reaction to the provocative actions of pro-Iranian formations, which, after the incident in which a Turkish rocket killed 9 Shiites in Iraq, began to protest at the Turkish embassy in Baghdad. Unfortunately, the coming days do not mean a drop in the political temperature in Iraq. The greatest Shiite festival of Ashura begins, commemorating the death of Imam Hussein at Karbala. This means that millions of Shiites will take to the streets in religious processions, always accompanied by politics. This may only be the beginning of the fight for the future of Iraq. And now it's time to welcome my guest, Sardar Sattar, a journalist who joins us from Erbil in northern Iraq. Sardar, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Nicholas.
It's a pleasure. For several weeks now, there's been some sort of political unrest and demonstrations in Iraq, which even led at one point to the occupation of the Iraqi parliament. I mean, do you see this arrest or the danger of this unrest becoming some form of civil war?
Conflict, especially armed conflict between the rivals, is still highly possible, especially after the contradicting statements that we heard from different political leaders in Iraq yesterday, despite the several domestic and international efforts to de-escalate the situation in Iraq. including the US, which is one of the main stakeholders in Iraq, Iran, Turkey, and even the United Nations, the situation is still very critical, and at any point it can go to the wrong direction, and it could lead to a civil war. Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's hope that doesn't happen. But one of the protagonists, Muqtada as-Sadr, challenges the pro-Iranian groups. But I mean, is he really anti-Iranian? I mean, what is his objective?
Muqtada as-Sadr is known as a very powerful, influential religious cleric and a very populist politician. He had very close ties with Iran, just together with all the other Shia parties. But at some point, he made a shift in his strategies, and he tried to stay away from the pro-Iranian Shia parties. They are both Shia parties, but he's trying to, as he claims, he's trying to take Iraq out of the hegemony of Iran and the Western countries as well.
And this conflict, I mean, how is it perceived elsewhere in the region? I mean, we know, for example, that Saudi Arabia and Iran are having talks in Baghdad. I mean, could these talks be derailed by the current conflict elsewhere in the country?
Of course, Iran and Saudi Arabia have held 5 backroom talks so far in Baghdad, brokered by Baghdad, and they were preparing for the next round of the talks. But so far, not only this kind of efforts for Iraq to be a critical player in the regional politics. Even within Iraq, there is a possibility of shutting down the government, because all the high security and high level government institutions are located inside the green zone, and there are thousands of supporters of Muqtada as-Sadr. So, of course, it is not only affecting the internal affairs of Iraq, but it also affects its efforts outside Iraq and the regional politics as well.
Yes, very. And of course, as we've discussed on previous episodes of the programme, I mean, when you look at the Middle East, and you look particularly at this part of the Middle East, this region, it's very much a mosaic of competing interests. And we see, for example, that there are clashes along the border, the Turkish-Iraqi border in Turkish Kurdistan. I mean, do you see whether there's the Turks or the Turkish government will seek to take advantage of the chaos in Baghdad for its own purposes?
I don't think it will lead to that stage, because the international community, especially the United Nations, is on track, and they are trying to de-escalate the situation. At the same time, there have been a very strong stance by the Iraqi government. Actually, it was for the first time to see such a strong stance from Iraq after Turkey killed 9 Iraqi tourists in a summer resort in Kurdistan region a few weeks ago. So I think the situation is very alarming, but all the neighbors are just trying to keep the situation calm for now, because it is not in the interest of any of the stakeholders.
Yes, and that's it. I wonder if you just might expand slightly on the Kurdistan issue. I mean, obviously Kurdistan, the region, is in a very sensitive border area with a number of countries. And in terms of the current conflict in Iraq, I mean, how is Kurdistan, or the aspirations of the Kurdish people to sort of try to carve out an independent state, what influence is that having?
The aspiration of the Kurds for statehood is not something new. They held an independence referendum in 2017, even though it didn't reach its goal, but it was a very open move to let the world that the Kurds are determined to have a state of their own. But in this critical situation, the Kurds are also divided. We have the Kurdistan Democratic Party, the major Kurdish political party which won the election by far from the other political parties. And we have the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, which holds the presidency of Iraq for now. In order to form a government in Baghdad, first of all, there should be a president in place. And the president conventionally is the position that is reserved for the Kurds, while the Shia hold the prime minister and the Sunnis hold the speaker of the parliament. So far, the Kurds have not reached any agreement to nominate one Kurdish politician for the position. So they have these disputes within the Kurdistan region as part of the general politics of Iraq. And on the other hand, the KDP is in alliance with the Sadrist movement, and the PUK is an ally of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan. So this has divided the Kurds as well. And so far, what we are seeing from the Kurds and also the Sunnis is that they are trying to see these disputes in Baghdad as an internal conflict between the Shias. So they are trying to stay out of it. The only statements we have heard from them is that they are supporting any initiative for a national dialogue that could de-escalate the situation.
And I wonder if I just might return. It was obviously big news a few years ago, and probably isn't very much any longer. But I wonder if there's still any Islamic State movement anywhere in Iraq, whether this is still perceived as a threat or whether that's something which has been and gone.
Well, Islamic State, if you mean is the ISIS, yes, still they are present in the area. Especially there are a very long area which is conventionally known as the disputed Kurdish territories. So far, the Iraqis, since the 2017 independence referendum of Kurdistan, the Iraqi forces are in control of those areas. But they believe the Kurds believe that these areas suffer from a lack of security, and the ISIS militants, the remnants of ISIS, are highly present in these areas, and they are regularly carrying out attacks targeting civilians and security forces. We actually hear almost on a daily basis, we hear that ISIS militants are attacking security forces and civilians, especially in the rural areas of Diyala, Salah ad-Din, Kirkuk, and Nineveh province. There is an area which is called by the locals as the Triangle of Death. It is located between the borders, provincial borders of Salah ad-Din, Kirkuk, and Diyala, where the ISIS groups are present there, and they are regrouping and reorganizing to be ready for terrorist attacks almost every day, every week, if not every day.
Okay, thank you for that. And I wonder if I just may ask a question about Christians. I mean, looking at not just in Iraq, but in the whole Middle East region, since the rise of what we might call, for want of a better term, militant Islam, Christian communities across the region have been very badly affected. And I wondered what the situation was with regards to Christians in northern Iraq.
Christians and the other religious minority groups, including the Yazidis, they suffered a lot. Only yesterday we were commemorating the victims of the Yazidis, which were killed in 2014 by ISIS. But the Yazidis were mostly moved out or slaughtered or moved out of their original areas, especially in the areas known as the Mosul Plains in around Bashiqa. These Christians fled to the Kurdistan region because they believed that there is a large community of Christians in the Kurdistan region living in peace and harmony with the Muslim community, Muslim host community.
Thank you very much indeed, Sadar, for joining us and for giving us your excellent summary of what's going on in Iraq. It's been fascinating to talk to you direct from the region. So thank you very much indeed, and we hope you'll join us again on Middle East Observer.
Thank you, Nicholas. Thank you
very much indeed. Well, that's all we've got time for on this edition of Middle East Observer. I think it's been fascinating. We were able to speak to a journalist who's actually there in the region, bring us completely up to date on the events, the ever-changing mosaic. It's a term I use a lot, but it seems the only one that's really accurate when we talk about the Middle East. The ever-changing mosaic of the Middle East. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed it. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to seeing you next time on Middle East Observer.